This is Access 2019 Module 5 Part 12, creating a lookup field. So let's go ahead and get into our Access database. We're in the clinic database and we're going to open up our table billing. I'm going to go into the design view. And on the invoice item ID, if we try to say we're going to set up a lookup wizard, you're going to get an error message that says you cannot set it up because it has a relationship already. When you set up a lookup field, it does create a relationship between the two tables that you're connecting. So you need to remove that relationship before you can start. So if you see that message that says you cannot change the data type, it is part of one or more relationships, you need to go close the table, go to the database tools and open up the relationships. You cannot delete relationships when the tables are open. All right, so we are trying to look at, I'm going to move this over a little bit so we can see it better. We're looking at this relationship here between the invoice ID invoice item ID and then the invoice item ID. We want to right click on that relationship. You can choose to edit the relationship, which will open up the window where you created it, and you can make changes to it. You can also choose to delete the relationship. Then you want to save your relationship change and close that. We'll go back in and look at the relationship at the end so that we can see the relationship that gets created. Now let's open up our billing table again and we're going to go back to the design view. On the invoice item ID, we're going to change the data type to start the lookup wizard. It says I want a lookup field to get the values from another table. And since our values are in another table, we'll go ahead and click Next. We're going to choose the table invoice item and then choose Next. Who wants to know which fields do we want to see in our lookup window? So we're going to do both. Now it wants to know how we're going to sort. So we're going to open up this first item here and we're going to choose the invoice item. So we're going to sort by the description, not the ID. Go to Next. Whoops, leave that at ascending. Go to Next. Now, you'll notice right now we only see the invoice item because this box is checked that says hide the key. If we want to see both fields, the invoice item ID as well as the description, we need to check the box. Now we can move these. I'm going to hold down the invoice item ID and move it to the other side. And then I'm going to drag out my invoice item ID larger. You could double click to do a best fit if you wanted to. But as you can see, the best fit is best fitting what's on the screen. And that's what I don't like about that particular one, is because if there's something lower that's larger or higher on the screen, it cuts it off. But you can do that to resize your screens. Then we'll choose next. And then it says, what are we going to be storing in the field? And we're going to store the ID. Choose next. And then it wants to know if it's still going to be the invoice ID. And we're going to say finish. So now it's telling us we have to save the change. So we're saving it. It doesn't look like it did anything until you go over to the datasheet view. So if you look at the invoice item ID, you can see now it is displaying the description. And when I do a lookup, when I click in the field, you can see I can see the item ID as well as the codes. Let's close this table. It's going to ask us to save, so we will. Then we'll go to the database tools, and I want you to look at the relationships. Right now, those referential integrity and cascading updates are not checked. So you might want to come back in there and check those when you created the relationship, if you didn't check the boxes to have those checked for you. And then you can save those changes and close the relationships. And that concludes lookup fields.